Hi, it's time for another verb of the day. Today's verb is stray. And this verb was suggested by the viewer Luis, and so I want to say a special thank you to him for making this great suggestion. I also want to encourage anyone else watching to suggest verbs that they encounter or see and want to know a little more about. Now, let's move on and talk about some of the different ways that we use the verb stray. The first way to use the verb stray can mean to move away from a group or from the right course or the right place. So sometimes as people think about this, they might think of small children or possibly animals, pets, that should be staying with others, but then they get sort of off course or they get away from their group, their family, their parents, what have you. Connected to this first definition, I want to note is it doesn't always have to be like a physical movement, but it could be in connection to ideas or a plan. So you might think of situations where at work your team has talked about doing A, then B, then C. And then as things get going, you do A, maybe B, but then you're off onto something else. And so you're kind of moving off or away from the plan. Another or second way to use the verb stray can mean to move idly or casually in a particular or specified direction. This is most commonly used with different parts of people's bodies. So you might hear a reference to someone's eyes straying, right? So moving, not a very quick movement, right? But moving in a particular direction. People might use it with their hands, their arms, etc. Now, a third way you might hear stray used can mean to be unfaithful to a partner or a spouse. So with this third definition, it has a really negative meaning. It's indicating that someone is cheating on their partner or their spouse. A fourth way you might hear stray used can mean to wander or roam in some particular direction. So this might be just for some relaxation. This fourth definition might seem similar to the first one, but I think of this one having less of a negative meaning to it. So in one, you're supposed to stay with your group or stay following the plan. And in four, it's just like someone who's kind of checking different things out, going in a different direction. For now, you should know that stray is a regular verb. To make the progressive form of this verb, all you have to do is add ing that forms straying. The past tense and participle forms of this verb can be made by adding ed. Now our base verb, stray, ends in a vowel sound. That's the long A sound. Because all vowel sounds are voiced, this means the ed ending is just going to make a D sound. So I'm not adding an extra syllable as I say it. The past tense and the participle forms of the verb should sound like this. Strayed, strayed. Okay. Now there are a couple phrasal verbs you might encounter. The first is to stray from. This can mean that someone is behaving in a way that runs contrary to something, or maybe is not following something. So you might think about that first definition, kind of getting off course, getting off track. So an example of this might be, have we strayed from the intent of the Constitution? Okay? This is something that comes up quite often in American politics and things connected to law here. So what we're asking is our behavior, or perhaps is this new law, maybe it's a new regulation, is it contrary to our founding legal document, the Constitution? Another phrasal verb you might encounter is to stray in or stray into. This phrasal verb can be used to talk about wandering into a particular place, and it's especially used when someone isn't supposed to be there, so there's no expectation the person should be in that place. An example of this might be, some children strayed into the cafeteria while the workers were away and created a mess. Okay? This sentence is suggesting that the children were not supposed to be there, but they were. And then you can see problems resulted. The last phrasal verb we'll discuss today is to stray on or stray onto. Again, this might mean that someone is wandering around an area, a piece of land. This is going to tie back most closely to the fourth definition. So, an example of this, we're going to stray idly on the beach for the entire afternoon. Okay? This might be someone's vacation plan, right? So, it means we're going to walk around. We don't have sort of a set agenda, a set plan. We're just going to experience nature. Now, let's continue using our verb of the day in a couple different verb tenses. Today we'll review the simple past tense and the simple present. Let's start with the simple past tense. We use this verb tense to talk about completed actions at a known point in the past. Sometimes there will be time signals. It could be a word like yesterday. It might be a specific date in the past. It might be something like 3 weeks ago, right? All of those can be ways to indicate a known point. But I want to note, not all sentences in the simple past tense have these time signals. Sometimes it is implied as part of a longer passage or text. It might also be implied as part of conversation. The nice thing about making sentences in the simple past tense is that our structure stays the same no matter what our subject is. So in the affirmative, I'm going to start with my subject. I'm going to use the ed form of the verb, and I'm going to continue on. So an example of this, the dog strayed over to check out the visitors. Here, this might tie back kind of to the fourth meaning, kind of wandering around. If I want to make a negative sentence in the simple past tense, my structure for this will be to start with my subject, use did not, and then the base verb. So notice I'm not using the ed form here in the negative. You may also notice that people will combine did not into a single word, didn't. That's actually in my example here. Her eyes didn't stray from the judge. Okay? It goes back to the second definition where we were talking about a certain part of one's body moving in a particular direction. So here, this really means this person kept her eyes focused on the judge. They weren't kind of moving around the room. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple past tense. To do this, start with did, then you're going to have your subject, and then the base verb. Again, we're not using the ed form of the verb. We're only doing that in the affirmative. Here's my last past tense example. Did the company stray from its original mission? Right. So here that's going back more to the first definition. You might be aware that some companies sort of create a mission. Why are we here? What are we attempting to do? Right? And this sort of means they got off track. They got away from that original idea. Now let's move on and talk a little bit about the simple present. We use this verb tense to talk about our habits and routines. We also use it to discuss facts. The important thing to remember about the simple present is that we need to pay attention to our subject. Our subject is going to change the verb just a little bit. So If my subject is I, you, we, or they, then I just use the base verb in the affirmative. But if my subject is he, she, or it, I need to add an S to the end of my verb. Here's an example sentence. The revival production strays from the original in each act. Okay. This sentence is describing, I believe it was a new play on Broadway. But it's not really a new. It's new in that it hadn't been performed for many, many years. And a reviewer, somebody who has seen it and somebody who saw the original one many, many years ago, right, talked about how different, how it kind of went off course. It didn't follow that original story. Now let's look at making negative sentences in the simple present. Again, it's really important we pay attention to our subject. If our subject is I, you, we, or they, then I use do not and then the base verb. But if the subject is he, she, or it, I'm going to use does not and then the base verb. Sometimes people will combine do not into the contraction don't, or the words does not into the contraction doesn't. Let's take a look at another example. The squirrels don't stray far from the feeders, even when I refill them. So this sentence was actually, I borrowed it from someone else's writing, kind of describing the wildlife that exists around her house. And she was saying they don't wander away, right? They stay very close. They're very excited to be fed by this particular person. Finally, let's look at making a yes or no question in the simple present. To do this, I start with do or does, whichever form matches my subject. That subject comes next. Then I use the base verb. Okay. Before we look at the example, let me remind you, the only time we're adding an S to the end of the verb is in the affirmative when the subjects are he, she, or it. So an example of a yes or no question in the simple present might be, do men stray more frequently than women? This is a question that ties back to the third meaning of the verb. So it's asking, do they cheat more frequently? Here is a question about a habit or routine. And I just want to say, I don't know the answer. I'm not weighing into it, but it is a question that I think many therapists and relationship experts examine and discuss. Now, let's move on and talk about two words that are related to our verb stray. And the first word we're going to talk about is just the noun form of this word. The noun stray has the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as our verb. Generally, when people use this word as a noun, they're talking about a domestic animal, a pet that is wandering outside. Maybe that pet is lost, not with their owners. And I really want to note here, this is only for pets. We're not using this noun to describe wild animals. So an example, maybe you see this lost dog wandering around and someone in your family says, oh, can we please help the stray? Okay. We're talking about the animal. Another word to discuss is the adjective form of this word. So again, stray as an adjective can have the exact same spelling and the exact same pronunciation as our verb. The adjective can be used in a few different ways. One way is to describe a noun that is not in the right place. An example of this might be, he found a stray hair in his meal, right? So we don't think of hair as belonging in our food, right? That hair is not in the right place. A second way to use that adjective stray can mean separated from a group or separated from a target. An example of this might be, a stray bullet struck the window. So what this sentence suggests is that someone was not aiming a gun and shooting at a window, but through some type of mistake or error, maybe an accident, right? It went into the window. A third way to use the adjective stray is to describe an animal that doesn't have a home or has wandered away from their home. Again, we tend to just use this with pets. So in the United States, I feel like it's probably most common to hear it used with cats and dogs, but other pets could also be lost. So an example of this might be, that shelter helps stray dogs and cats. So, and these particular pets that don't have homes. Thanks again to Luis for suggesting today's video, and thank you all for watching. I hope you have a great day.